If you're new to death metal or just want something that's easy to get into, Ravage of Empires by Benediction might be exactly what you're looking for. If you didn't know, Benediction is a British death metal band that formed in Birmingham, England in 1989. They've been active since their formation. They released their first album, Subconscious Terror, in 1990, and they are one of the original death metal bands from England, along with Bolt Thrower. There are two members, Pete Rowinski on the guitar and Darren Brooks on rhythm, and they've been with the band since the beginning. They have changed vocalists over the years. So, for example, the original vocalist Mark Barney Greenway left the band and became more known for being in Napalm Death, but he was replaced by Dave Ingram, who was in the band during the 90s, and he came back in 2019. Their previous album in 2020 was called Scriptures. I remember when this one came out. I didn't get a chance to review it because my channel was very new at the time. I heard a lot of people talking about it. For example, Necrotic Nick from Thralls of Metal called it a comeback album. And a lot of that had to do with Dave Ingram coming back in the band back in 2019. So now it's time to talk about Ravage of Empires. That was released on April 4th, 2025. It's pretty much a continuation of their 2020 album. And in my opinion, I thought it was pretty easy to listen to. The reason I say that because it's mostly a death metal album. I heard a lot of influences from thrash metal, so there was that aspect of the album. But basically, the album is an old school death metal album. It has lots of tremolo pick guitar riffs, blast beats. The vocals are of the typical death metal genre, but a lot of the guitar riffs are similar to thrash and have that particular groove to it. I even thought there were a few riffs that reminded me of Slayer, and lots of songs with faster blast beats and galloping guitar riffs that were typical of thrash. But the album also has lots of energy and maintains good momentum, and that's throughout the entire runtime. I felt all the songs were very consistent. There's also a nice heavy groove. I also feel it's a little easier to listen to than some other death metal bands, which try to be very extreme and heavy. But these songs have a nice groove, and they also don't lose that old school death metal sound. It's pretty basic. They're not reinventing the wheel. They're doing it well, and probably the best thing about this album, there are lots of different types of guitar riffs, including those machine gun riffs, other simple death metal style guitar riffs, and there are also some darker lead guitar playing with lots of traditional guitar solos with harmonies and descending melodies. As for the lyrics, they are typical death metal lyrics talking about war and walking over corpses and things like that. I didn't really delve too much into the lyrics, but being that the vocalist is easy to understand, you can kind of get the gist of what they're talking about when you listen to the songs. There's not much variation. There was one song where I thought they slowed it down a little bit. It reminded me a little bit of that band Autopsy, but otherwise, a lot of this is going to be similar to classic death metal bands such as Obituary, Jungle Rot, and the aforementioned Bolt Thrower. The album opens with A Carrion Harvest. This is just some pure old school death metal with lots of tremolo pick guitar riffs and blast beats. I found the vocalist was understandable and the song is not that complex. I heard some of those Slayer style guitar riffs as well, and even pay homage. Not sure if it was intentional, but they say the line "Hell awaits," and it basically features one repetitive guitar riff, and it wasn't as complex as other typical death metal bands. So I thought it was something that made it easier to listen to. Next track is called Beyond the Veil of the Grey Mare. This was more of a traditional death metal song with fast drum beats and palm muted guitar riffs, and I felt a lot of the riffs were reminiscent of the band Death. It had a very old school sound. The vocals were very understandable. There's a section in the middle that sounded like thrash, which features guitar riffs, and the track also had these cool, spooky melodies, and that just added a little spice to the sound. After this is Genesis Chamber. This one had more of a dark and evil sound with a slow building intro. It was a typical death metal song with tremolo pick guitar riffs, blast beats. There was also a slower guitar riffs. The vocals, as always, are understandable, and the song had a nice melody. This is followed by Deviant Spine. It's more of a mid-paced death metal song with some cool double bass drumming. The guitar riffs were repetitive, and there were some isolated guitar riffs, but I don't have much else to say about it. I like the song. If you want to become a member of the channel, the first tier is only 99 cents. It gives you early access to my videos. The second tier is $2.99. Not only do you get early access, but you can request album reviews. There's a join button below or a link in the video description. Next track is probably my favorite song on the album, called Engines of War. I think I liked it. It was more of a thrash metal with death metal vocals, but then transitions into old school guitar riffs, and the lyrics are about war. They said the word like war, or war, like in a very pronounced manner, making it very memorable. Something we've heard in so many other songs, and I know other bands have done that, but it was cool. There are some spoken word parts. It has some creepy descending riffs, and I like the song a lot. Probably my favorite. Next song is The Finality of Perpetration. This sounds like old school death metal. They say the opening line, crank it up, and then another part where they count like 1 to 7. I thought that was a little cheesy, but otherwise, very old school death metal. Lots of classic guitar riffs. It has a sound typical of the genre. It features galloping guitar rhythms, great guitar riffs, and some pretty cool drum rolls at the end of the song. This also has some pretty cool hardcore style guitar riffs and a breakdown that I thought was pretty cool. There's a track called Crawling Over Corpses. It's just the title itself makes it sound very old school death metal. Also has some thrash metal style galloping rhythms mixed with some traditional death metal riffs, has some lead guitar melodies, and the song is probably more on the melodic side. In the Dread of Night is another old school death metal track with classic blast beats and has dark melodic leads and galloping rhythms, has an old school death metal sound, but also just has some really dark and sinister chugging sounds and some nice grooves. There are 3 more songs in the album. We have Drought of Mercy, which is a mid-paced death metal track. Another song that stands out a little bit because they slow it down. I thought there were some elements of Death Doom. I thought it had been Autopsy. Not a completely slow song, but it builds some momentum. So another one I liked pretty much. The second to last song is called Psycho Sister. It's more on the slower side. The guitar riffs are more repetitive and feature some darker lead guitar riffs. The last song or the title track is Ravage of Empires. It had more of those Slayer style guitar riffs, but still maintained an old school death metal sound. Another mid-paced death metal song. Now for my final thoughts, I think it's just a very fun and enjoyable death metal album. A good follow-up to their previous album, Scriptures. It's very consistent. I wouldn't say it has any weak songs. Probably the type of album that would be a good starting point for people who don't listen to a lot of death metal and they're interested in checking it out. And I thought it was a little easier to listen to. It's not very complex. In addition, there are some comparisons to thrash metal. The vocals are easy to understand. It still had a very good production value, and I like the drum sound. And that gave it a heavier sound. And there's also more of a focus on guitar riffs as opposed to those traditional shredding guitar solos, which is kind of lacking on this album, but it doesn't really matter because the guitar riffs are very abundant and they work very well in the context of the album. So in general, they don't really stray from the formula. There might be some hints of black metal or doom metal or hardcore, but they're a little more subdued and they're not really in your face. I thought it was a solid album. I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. I enjoyed it. I think it's just basic meat and potatoes, death metal, just the kind of album you put on and have fun with it. And that's all I have to say. If you didn't know, there's another band called Memoriam, and it features Frank Healy and Scott Fairfax. They are former members of Benediction. They released an album called Ride to Power in 2023. I thought that would be a good video for you to watch next. I will stick that right here. In the meantime, please give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you've not already. I do recommend reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.